My parents and sister told me, we're going to Europe tomorrow. Watch the house. Just give birth already and get out of here. Then my sister shoved me into the basement and slammed the door shut. Days later, when they came back, they saw a dark red liquid seeping from under the basement door. This? My mother's face turned pale. The Boston winter was unforgivingly harsh. Outside, snow fell silently, and Rebecca Williams sat alone in front of the fireplace in her parents' living room. She never thought she'd be back at her childhood home, especially under these circumstances. Rebecca, dinner's ready. Her mother Eleanor's voice called from the kitchen. Though it sounded warm and kind on the surface, Rebecca could detect a hint of irritation. Yes, I'm coming, Rebecca said, slowly rising to her feet, unconsciously placing a hand on her abdomen. It had been only 2 weeks since she discovered her pregnancy. Morning sickness and fatigue left her body worn out, and her mind was in turmoil. 3 months after she and David had separated, her life had taken a dramatic turn. In the dining room, her father Walter was already seated, reading a newspaper. He had worked as a bank manager until retirement, and was now enjoying a comfortable life on his pension. When Rebecca sat down, Rebecca attempted to start a conversation, was his only reply. Her sister Samantha was the last to take her seat. Unlike Rebecca, she was bright and energetic, usually the most talkative member of the family. However, since her sister had returned home, she had become strangely quiet. I was so busy today with client meetings, Samantha said, picking up her wine glass. She worked at a marketing company and always had exciting work stories. We're starting a new project. A really big one. That's wonderful, dear, Eleanor smiled, placing a large salad bowl on the table. You're always working so hard. Rebecca began eating in silence. She used to build her career at an accounting firm, a source of family pride. After marrying David, however, she gradually prioritized her home life over work, eventually switching to part-time. And now, separated from David, pregnant and temp. Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious. Temporarily living with her parents, her life had not gone according to plan at all. So, Rebecca, her father suddenly addressed her. Have you heard from David? Rebecca caught her breath for a moment. Yes, a little. But nothing's been decided yet. Are you considering divorce? Walter's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. I don't know, Rebecca answered honestly. We need to talk, but right now. Have you told him about the pregnancy? Eleanor interrupted. The concern in her tone seemed more like irritation about the complexity of the situation, rather than worry for her daughter. Not yet, Rebecca answered in a small voice. I'm waiting for the right moment. A heavy silence fell over the table. Rebecca felt the family's eyes on her, judging her, expecting something from her. Rebecca? Samantha suddenly spoke. Are you really planning to have this baby? Rebecca stared at her sister in surprise. Of course. Why would you ask that? Because, can you raise a child alone? What about your job? Money? And Samantha's words trailed off. And what? Rebecca's voice grew slightly stronger. Nothing. Eleanor intervened, smoothing things over. We're just worried about you. We want you to make the best decision. Rebecca nodded silently. Inside, she wanted to object more forcefully, but she lacked the energy. The separation, pregnancy, and tense family relationships, it all exhausted her. Later that evening, as they were relaxing in the living room, her father made a loud announcement. Everyone, listen. We're going on a European trip the day after tomorrow. Rebecca looked up in surprise. Europe? Why so suddenly? It's not sudden, Eleanor explained. We've been planning it for 2 months. We're going to tour Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. I'm going too, Samantha said excitedly. I took time off. A family vacation at last. Rebecca was confused. No one had mentioned this plan since she'd returned home. Should I come too? Rebecca asked tentatively. The three of them tensed momentarily. You're not feeling well, are you? Eleanor said. And considering your situation, it's best for you to rest quietly at home. You're right, Rebecca weakly agreed. She truly wasn't feeling well, and she needed time to think. Still, she couldn't help feeling left out by her family. The next morning, Rebecca sat alone at the kitchen table for breakfast. The house was noisy. She could hear suitcases being dragged down the hallway, the hairdryer from the bathroom, and occasionally Eleanor giving instructions to someone. She took just one bite of toast, frowning at her lack of appetite. Morning sickness was worst in the morning. Taking a sip of warm herbal tea, she felt her stomach settle slightly. "Good morning, Rebecca," Samantha said, entering the kitchen. She appeared ready for travel, wearing fitted jeans paired with a white blouse, her hair perfectly styled. In contrast, Rebecca was still in her loose pajamas. "Good morning," Rebecca smiled. "Looks like you're all set." "Yes. I'm going to look for my exercise shoes now," Samantha said, taking orange juice from the refrigerator. "I'm looking forward to jogging along the Seine River in Paris." "That sounds lovely," Rebecca said. Rebecca let out a small sigh. She used to be active too. She had met David during training for a half marathon. They grew close running side by side and fell in love. Now that seemed like ancient history. "Is there anything you want me to bring back for you?" Samantha suddenly asked. There was genuine kindness in her voice, showing concern for her sister. "Nothing in particular. But thank you," Rebecca replied. "I see. Well, I'm off to do some last-minute shopping." After Samantha left the room, silence returned. Rebecca gazed out the window. The snow had stopped, and a clear winter sky spread out. Imagining the warm European climate, she felt a bit lonely. All day the family was busy with their preparations and hardly spoke with Rebecca. She spent her time reading books in her room or gazing out the window. Occasionally she heard her parents' hushed conversations in the hallway, but they would fall silent whenever she approached, so she couldn't tell what they were discussing. In the evening, the doorbell rang. "Rebecca, could you get that, please?" Eleanor's voice called from downstairs. Rebecca slowly descended the stairs and headed for the door. When she opened it, a delivery person stood there. "Package for the Williams family," he said. After receiving the package and signing for it, Rebecca carried the box to the living room. "Mom, there's a package," she announced. Entering the living room, she found Eleanor, Walter, and Samantha all seated together. The three of them looked relaxed, having finished their travel preparations. "Oh, that's wine," Eleanor explained. "Special French wine. It's a gift for friends we're meeting there." Rebecca placed the box on the table. "Shall I start preparing dinner?" "It's already done," Eleanor answered. "We can eat in about 10 minutes." During dinner, a tense atmosphere hung over the table. Her parents discussed their flight time and post-arrival plans, while Samantha occasionally joined the conversation while checking her smartphone. Rebecca continued eating quietly, rarely participating in the conversation. "Rebecca," Eleanor suddenly said, "there are a few things I want to discuss about while we're away." Rebecca looked up. "What is it?" "First, I've stocked the refrigerator with plenty of food. Also, I've posted an emergency contact list on the kitchen board." "I understand. And please don't touch the wine cellar in the basement. Especially the vintage bottles on the back shelf, they're very valuable." "Of course," Rebecca agreed, somewhat puzzled. She rarely went down to the basement anyway. After dinner, the family began to relax in the living room. Rebecca was helping with cleanup in the kitchen when she overheard a conversation. "Are you sure this is all right?" It was Samantha's quiet voice. "We have no other choice," Eleanor replied. "Let's proceed as planned." Rebecca strained to hear more, but she couldn't make out the rest of the conversation. With an uneasy feeling, she decided to return to her room. As night fell, the family retired to their respective rooms. Rebecca lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would begin a long period of solitude. She thought this might be a good opportunity to carefully consider her future, the baby, and her relationship with David. Past midnight, she felt thirsty. Quietly getting up, she left her room and headed downstairs. While drinking water in the kitchen, she heard a sound behind her. "Who's there?" Rebecca turned around. Samantha was standing there. She seemed to have come for water too. "Can't sleep?" Samantha asked. "No, not really," Rebecca admitted. "Me neither." Samantha stood next to Rebecca. "I'm excited about tomorrow's trip. Enjoy yourself," Rebecca smiled. "Rebecca." Samantha's voice suddenly became serious. "I'm worried about you." "Worried? Why?" "This pregnancy. Are you really going to be okay on your own?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "I'll be fine. I take responsibility for my decisions. But how will you raise a child when you can't even fix your relationship with David? There was a hint of irritation in Samantha's voice. That's for me to figure out. Rebecca's voice hardened. Why are you being so stubborn? Samantha's voice suddenly grew louder. Why don't you just have the baby and go away? Stop interfering with our lives. Rebecca froze at her sister's words. What did you say? Samantha's expression faltered for a moment, but quickly filled with determination. Come with me, she said. She grabbed Rebecca's arm and began pulling her. What are you doing? Let go. Rebecca resisted, but her pregnancy had weakened her, and she was no match for her athletic sister. Samantha dragged Rebecca from the hallway to the door leading to the basement and down the stairs. Rebecca struggled desperately, but suddenly felt a push from behind and nearly tumbled down the stairs. She managed to grab the handrail to avoid falling completely, but still collapsed on the basement floor. Samantha, what are you thinking? Rebecca's voice trembled with fear and anger. Good luck with your babysitting, Samantha said coldly, closing the door. The sound of a key turning echoed in the darkness of the basement. Rebecca rushed to the door and frantically tried to turn the knob. But the door wouldn't budge. Open up! Samantha! Mom! Anyone! Her cries reached no one, and soon the house fell silent. In the basement darkness, for the first few hours, Rebecca's mind was blank with confusion and fear. She knocked on the door repeatedly, screamed and called for help, but there was no response. Her family had truly left her behind and gone on their trip. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she gradually began to make out her surroundings. There was a small window near the ceiling that let in faint light. Using this light, Rebecca started to explore. The basement was larger than she had thought. Walter's wine collection lined an entire wall of shelves, and old furniture and unused appliances were piled in the corners. There was a small bathroom area in the back with an old toilet and a small sink. Basic survival was possible. In one corner of the floor, there was a cardboard box. Opening it, she found some bread, bottled water, and canned goods. Her family had left just enough food to keep her from starving. Rebecca gave a bitter smile. What thoughtfulness! Why? She whispered in the darkness. She couldn't understand the sudden change in her family's behavior, especially her sister Samantha's. Certainly her pregnancy might have been unexpected for the family, but was it enough to deserve such treatment? She gradually lost her sense of time. Only the sunrise and sunset visible through the window told her of time's passage. Rebecca tried to escape numerous times. She kicked at the door, reached for the window, tried to stack furniture to climb up to the window, but all in vain. The door was securely locked, and the window was too high to reach. On the second day, Rebecca began to regain her composure. Panicking wouldn't improve the situation. Her first priority was to protect her and her baby's health. She planned to eat the food carefully and ration the water. Then she began to devise new escape plans. On the third day, she decided to investigate the basement more thoroughly. While examining the shelves behind the wine cellar, she discovered an old toolbox. Inside were basic tools, screwdrivers, pliers, a hammer. I might be able to do something with these, she thought, beginning to feel hopeful. She could try to remove the window frame or take the door hinges off. However, when she actually tried, these plans proved difficult to execute. The window frame was embedded in concrete, and the door hinges were on the outside. On the fourth day, Rebecca made another discovery. She found an old album in a box. Opening it to pass the time, she saw family photos, her parents when they were young, Rebecca and Samantha as children, and then Rebecca gasped. Toward the back of the album, there was a familiar man, David, her husband. But strangely, he was pictured alongside Samantha. Moreover, it was clearly a recent photo. The two were smiling, arms linked on a beach. What is this? Rebecca's mind began to form a terrible suspicion. She examined the album further and found other photos, David and Samantha dining at a restaurant, holding hands while walking in a park. All these photos were from around the time Rebecca and David had begun living separately. It can't be. Her heart began racing. David and Samantha. Her husband and her sister. Were they having an affair? And did her parents know and condone it? If so, her pregnancy would be an obstacle for them. For David, it would mean child support issues for Samantha, the complexity of a relationship with a man who had a child with her sister. As the truth gradually became clear, Anger welled up inside Rebecca. Betrayal. Deception. And now, this imprisonment. She sat on the basement floor, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. But soon she rallied herself. "I won't give up," she said. She placed a hand on her stomach and whispered, "It's okay. We'll get out of here. And we'll confront them with the truth." Rebecca decided on revenge. Not just escape, but to instill fear in them and expose the truth. Her plan gradually took shape. The tools from the toolbox and Walter's precious wine collection. She would use these to teach her family an unforgettable lesson. She needed to prepare before the family returned. Rebecca took a bottle of wine and examined the label. A 1978 Bordeaux. The bottle her father often said he was saving for a special occasion. "The special day has come, Dad," she said. She carefully opened the bottle and transferred its contents into a glass container. The deep red liquid looked like blood. Rebecca patiently refined her plan. Using tools, she widened the gap under the door slightly so liquid could flow out. When the family returned, the first thing they would see would be a dark red liquid seeping from under the basement door. Like blood. She also prepared the photographic evidence she had discovered in the album. Photos showing David and Samantha's relationship, and other evidence she had found in the basement. With these, she would confront them with the truth. The final part of her plan was her own performance. When the family opened the basement door in fear, she would stand there smiling. As if nothing had happened. The psychological effect would be immeasurable. With her family's return scheduled for tomorrow, all preparations were complete. She opened several of Walter's most expensive vintage wines and collected their contents in a large bowl. "I'm sorry, Dad. I never intended to use your precious collection like this," she murmured calmly. There was no longer anger or fear, only cold determination. That night, Rebecca made her final preparations. Taking pliers from the toolbox, she widened the gap under the door further. The wood splintered slightly, creating a sufficient opening. Then she waited. In the darkness, quietly, patiently. The next morning, she woke to the sound of a car engine. Her family had returned. Rebecca picked up the bowl and approached the door. Slowly, she poured the dark red liquid under the door. The liquid spread across the floor, gradually flowing down the stairs and seeping out beyond the door. From upstairs, she could hear luggage being unloaded and voices conversing. Then, a sudden scream. What is this?" It was Eleanor's voice, terrified. "Walter! Come quickly!" Eleanor's scream echoed throughout the house. Heavy footsteps raced down the stairs. "What happened?" Walter's voice was filled with urgency. Rebecca listened intently to the sounds beyond the door from the darkness of the basement. She was still pouring the wine, but the bowl would soon be empty. She felt a quiet satisfaction at their predictable reaction. "Blood. From the basement." Eleanor's voice was trembling. "Samantha," Walter shouted. "Call 911. Now." The sound of hurried footsteps, going back and forth. Rebecca finished pouring the last of the wine and quietly set the bowl on the floor. Then she stood in the center of the basement, facing forward, waiting. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning, and the door swung open forcefully. Bright light flooded Rebecca's eyes. On the other side of the door stood Walter, his face pale. He held a gun in his hand. "Rebecca." Walter's voice was disbelieving. Rebecca smiled. "Welcome back, Dad." Eleanor peered from behind her husband. Her expression mixed fear with relief. "You're all right?" "Yes, as you can see," Rebecca answered calmly. "Just a bit thirsty." Walter's eyes moved to the dark red liquid spreading on the floor. "This is your precious vintage wine, Dad," Rebecca said gently. "The ones you were saving for a special occasion." Samantha raced down the stairs. "I called the pole." She lost her words at the sight of the basement door. "Rebecca?" "Hello, Samantha," Rebecca's voice held subtle sarcasm. "Did you enjoy your trip?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Walter slowly lowered his gun, looking at his wife in confusion. "Let's go upstairs." Rebecca broke the silence. "We have a lot to talk about." In the living room, no one was eager to start the conversation. Rebecca sat on the sofa, staring at her family. They returned her gaze with expressions mixing fear and guilt. "Why?" Rebecca asked directly. "Why did you lock me in the basement?" Eleanor tried to speak, but Samantha spoke first. "Because you were in the way." "Samantha, Eleanor tried to stop her daughter. No, Mother. Samantha became emotional. It's fine. We don't need to hide anymore. She turned to Rebecca. You ruined everything. David and I were happy. Rebecca tried to maintain her composure, but her heart began to race. David and you? Though she already knew, hearing it directly from her sister was a different kind of shock. Yes. Samantha stood up. David and I have been together for over a year, since you were boring him. Samantha, that's enough, Walter said in a low voice. No, Dad, Rebecca said. Let her continue. I want to hear everything. Samantha gave a bitter laugh. What do you want to hear? How unhappy David was living with you. How much he smiles when he's with me. Rebecca said quietly, I knew. I found photos in the basement. Surprise flashed across Samantha's face for a moment. You pretended to go on a trip, but were actually with David? Rebecca observed their expressions as she spoke. Their silence was the answer. So you locked me in the basement because of the baby? Because having David's child would interfere with your happiness? Eleanor suddenly said, It was for your sake too, Rebecca. Her voice had an apologetic tone. You can't raise a child alone. We needed some time to think of another solution. Another solution? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. What kind of solution? We were? Eleanor's words trailed off. Were you planning to let me out of the basement? Rebecca's voice trembled slightly. There was no answer. Suddenly the front door opened, and a man's voice was heard. Is anyone home? Samantha? Rebecca's blood froze. She knew that voice well. It was David. When he entered the living room, he noticed the tension in the air. Then, seeing Rebecca sitting on the sofa, he stopped in his tracks. Rebecca? The color drained from his face. Why? Hello, David, Rebecca said evenly. How was Europe? David looked at Samantha in confusion. Samantha bit her lip and shrugged. She was supposed to be in the basement, Samantha said in a small voice. Shock spread across David's face. What did you say? Rebecca quietly stood up. I was locked in the basement, David. While you all enjoyed your European vacation, she said with irony. That's David looked at Samantha, then at Walter and Eleanor. Is this true? It is, Rebecca answered. And so is this. She placed several photos on the table, the ones from the basement that showed David and Samantha's relationship. A heavy silence fell over the room. David stared at the photos, then covered his face with his hands. Why? Rebecca asked her husband. Why with my sister? David slowly raised his face. Tears glistened in his eyes. At first, it was just a whim. You were so absorbed in work, you weren't paying attention to me. Is that your excuse for an affair? Rebecca's voice was cold. No, there's no excuse. David's shoulders slumped. I was wrong. And he looked at Samantha. Everything spiraled out of control. We love each other. Samantha's voice was defiant. Let's stop the lies, David. David said painfully. Samantha, what you said about locking Rebecca in the basement, that's we had no other choice. Samantha shouted. Her pregnancy ruined everything. Pregnancy? David looked at Rebecca with a shocked expression. You're pregnant? Rebecca nodded slowly. So? David looked accusingly at Samantha. That's why you locked her in the basement. Walter stepped forward. We didn't intend to hurt her. We just wanted to manage the situation. Manage? Rebecca gave a bitter laugh. Weren't you planning to leave me in the basement to starve to death? No, Eleanor cried. We never meant to. She lost her words. Rebecca picked up her mobile phone from the table. Should I call the police? Don't, Samantha cried. Please, Rebecca, we're family. Family? Rebecca laughed coldly. Family doesn't hurt each other. Family doesn't lock each other up. David stepped forward. Please don't call the police, Rebecca. Let's talk. How can we make amends? Rebecca finished for him. For locking me in the basement, taking my husband, endangering my baby. How can you make amends? The whole family fell silent. Rebecca looked at each of their faces. Fear, regret, and despair. These were the reactions she had been seeking. I've had enough, Rebecca finally said. I'm leaving this house. I'll start a new life. Away from all of you. Rebecca, Eleanor said through tears. Please forgive us. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Rebecca said quietly. But one thing is certain. This child and I can be happy without you." She left the living room and headed upstairs to her room, leaving behind what was once her family, once her husband, and the memory of betrayal. While packing her belongings in her room, she gazed at the snowy landscape outside the window. A new season was about to begin. 6 months later, in a small house in suburban Boston, spring sunlight streaming through the window created a bright rectangle on the living room floor. Rebecca sat in a rocking chair, holding her 2-week-old baby. The little girl showed a peaceful, sleeping face in her mother's arms. "Emma, you're such a strong girl." Rebecca kissed her daughter's cheek lightly. "Just like your mommy." The doorbell rang, and Rebecca quietly stood up. Opening the door, there stood David. In his hands were a bouquet and a small gift. "May I come in?" he asked, tentatively. Rebecca silently invited him in. There was still tension between them, but not as cold as before. Entering the living room, David saw the sleeping baby. "She's truly beautiful." His voice trembled with emotion. "Yes," Rebecca adjusted her hold on her daughter. "A strong and beautiful girl." David sat on the sofa and said with a nervous expression, "I'm truly sorry. For endangering you and the baby, for betraying you, for everything." Rebecca listened in silence. This wasn't the first time David had apologized. Since that day, he had contacted her multiple times, informing her that he had completely ended his relationship with Samantha. "I want you back," David said with a serious gaze. "Won't you give me another chance? As Emma's father, and as your husband." Rebecca looked out the window. Over the past 6 months, she had learned to live independently. A new job, a new home, and new friends. She had proven she could live strongly on her own. "It will take time," she finally said. "We can't go back to how things were right away." But she exhaled softly. "I think Emma needs a father. Perhaps it's worth trying again." Hope lit up David's face. "Thank you, Rebecca." That evening, Rebecca received a phone call. It was from Eleanor. "How are you doing?" Her mother's voice was hesitant. "Emma and I are both fine," Rebecca answered briefly. "Would you let us see her, our granddaughter?" Eleanor's voice was pleading. After a long silence, Rebecca said, "Someday. But not yet." "I understand." Eleanor's voice mixed resignation with hope. "We'll wait." "And, about Samantha. How is she?" Rebecca asked calmly. "She started living alone in New York. She's reflecting too." Rebecca said nothing. Forgiveness takes time. And she would never forget. That night, Rebecca sat beside Emma's bed, holding her tiny hand, thinking. Her life had taken unexpected turns. There had been suffering, but beyond that, she could see the possibility of new happiness. "We'll be okay, Emma," she whispered. "No matter what happens, we'll live strongly." Outside the window, the twilight sky turned red, announcing the beginning of a new night. Rebecca's new life, too, had just begun.